Welcome to Deleted Saves. On this episode, The Punisher on PlayStation 2. You know, dear listeners, way back when I did my showcase on the PS2 and its games that stuck out to me most across its massive library, The Punisher for the PS2 was a game I enjoyed the hell out of, but when I began the show, I figured there really wasn't a lot of love for it, let alone interest. As time has gone on, I believe I may have been mistaken. I am here to correct that oversight. Let's look at this Marvel Comics gem of a game with 2005's The Punisher. The long-running saga of Frank Castle, Marvel's man who has fallen out of time with his origins, has never been a clear or even path. Castle was a man of the 1970s, a Vietnam veteran of the Marine Corps, his family murdered by the Italian mob for accidentally seeing a crime in progress, who snaps and begins to wage a one-man war on crime, separate from so many other Marvel stable of characters, even those on his power level, such as Daredevil or Moon Knight. Castle never hid his face behind a mask. His enemies always knew exactly who was killing them. The Punisher started out as a Spider-Man antagonist, but in the comics it was found that the disturbed antihero had been led astray by another of Spider-Man's villains. That didn't excuse what the Punisher did, but it explains it. The problem is Frank Castle was way more popular with fans than Marvel expected, so a series based on his adventures was short in coming. But as the decades rolled on in the real world, the story of the Punisher doomed him to eventual obscurity. The Mafia, as popular culture knows them, had been mostly hunted down and dismantled by the FBI at long last. Vietnam War and what it meant to the public as one of the United States' most controversial wars, police action, as it was justified as, that was also a loss for our nation, kind of evaporated in the wake of the attacks on the U.S. during September 11th, and the resulting conflict that dragged on for over 20 fucking years, and now most Vietnam vets are in their 70s and 80s, similar to how we are almost out of World War II veterans because the slow entropy of time means what they experience is now far from the American consciousness. No need, and no one really wants, a mob killer from the forgotten conflict, forgotten only because time has moved us all on and so much of what happened since then. Since they have tried to keep Frank relevant, such as having him take on the metahumans of the Marvel Universe, having him talk to God directly and spend some time as a literal avenging angel, and depending on the writer, spending some time spiraling into sociopathic behavior or amoral murder sprees in an effort to be edgy. Even the recent Marvel TV series, which I did watch and thought was very good with John Bernthal as the title role, did update the Punisher to being a veteran of Afghanistan and his family killed by rogue drug-dealing mercenaries who met during the conflict. But despite this, and given the nature of the character, it's unlikely he'll be showing up in whatever the fuck stage of Marvel movie rolls out of Disney it is in now. Not that Disney minds raking in cash on murder and bloodshed. They just don't directly tie their mouse to it as an official brand. In any case, this game was not the only Punisher game out there. There was an on-rails shooter on the NES, a PC game with the character, and a little remembered but recently revived with the freshly released Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection Arcade Classics. There's a mouthful. Beat 'em up featuring Frank and Nick Fury. But most have fallen by the wayside. He's not the X-Men, he's not Spider-Man, he's not the Avengers. He is Marvel's black sheep uncle, the one who shows up every other couple Thanksgivings, half drunk and spouting the kind of conspiracy theories that even your already racist and homophobic relatives find uncomfortable to be around. But he was also one of my favorite characters in the Marvel Universe, so I don't know what that says about me. I try to avoid family Thanksgivings. This Punisher video game may be the most involved of the bunch, being a third-person action game known for its gory kills and, I'll admit, mostly stable story that escalates more like a Grand Theft Auto game instead of the ridiculous lengths comic books can go to. Most intriguingly, this version of the Punisher is voiced by actor Thomas Jane, who had recently played the character in the 2004 movie by the same name. Now, full disclosure, I liked that movie. I went to the theater to see it, and I thought Jane did a great job in the role, better than Dolph Lundgren did in 1989, although no shade against Lundgren. I hated John Travolta in the 2004 film, but sorry, film buffs, I hate Travolta as an actor and as a person, and his role was the worst part of it. The 2004 Punisher movie was based mainly on two comics, Punisher Year One by Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning, and Welcome Back, Frank by Garth Ennis, most known for his grimdark supernatural comic Preacher, along with some bits from other comics. The movie, of course, got panned, most sourly by everyone's favorite golden oldie film critic Roger Ebert, whom I hope rests in piss. But like I said, I think it was a fun popcorn flick, and Jane did a good job. Volition, the game developer, must have thought so as well, or at least got told they were contractually obligated to hire him, and they had Jane reprise his role as Frank Castle for this game. The mechanics of this game are very simple. Third-person action shooter, and the Punisher can carry two one-handed weapons and a heavier two-handed weapon. Through each level, the Punisher can grab enemies and torture them for information, such as slamming their heads into windowsills, sticking them in drill presses, or threatening to drop cars on them. Anything in the environment, and all the environmental kills are quite unique. My favorite being in the Central Park Zoo level, where you can goad a rhinoceros into charging at and goring a thug. Now, you don't need to kill anyone in these events, you can just knock them out. But let's be honest, these are criminals, and it's the Punisher. So bullshit you aren't going to kill a few of them in spectacular and explosively gory fashions. Additionally, as you kill bad guys, you have a rage meter, which builds until you unleash it in a berserker mode, where the screen goes monochromatic and Frank begins to hallucinate the voices of his dead family while he slaughters everything on screen. In between missions, Frank returns to his hideout, where you can choose which weapon you will outfit yourself with for the start of the next mission. Some purchased, most unlocked through picking them up through the levels. And where you will hear more story, unlock collectibles, and all those mid-2000 goodies we found in games back then. The story goes like this. Frank is in an interrogation cell in a Rikers Island prison, a real place in New York City, where he has been operating lately killing criminals. Much of the game is told in flashback as two cops interrogate Frank, where he begins to tell his tale. It starts with him invading a crack den where, unsurprisingly, Frank does not take kindly to drug dealers and is looking for their boss, nicknamed Damage. Upon killing Damage, Frank is almost run over by a fleeing car that he tracks to a chop shop, which then leads to him discovering the Nucci crime families involved. Yes, a lot of these names will sound like an appetizer menu at Olive Garden. And along the way, the Punisher kills one of Ma Nucci's sons because criminal. Ma Nucci takes this personally, kind of like a knockoff Don Corleone, and hires a mercenary named Bushwhacker to kidnap a neighbor of the Punisher and draw him out of hiding. The Punisher finds him and, of course, kills him and saves the neighbor, and then goes on to liquidate the entire crime family at the funeral for the Nucci son he killed, and then at their mansion compound, where he wipes them all out, including Ma Nucci. Along the way, Frank discovers the Nucci family was getting their drug money from Russian mobsters, and were helping them get past U.S. immigration and security, as the Russian mob was working with a disgraced Russian general who is trying to smuggle a nuclear bomb into New York City. Frank goes to the Russian ship that they were using, discovers it's a white slavery ring as well, and paints that entire white slavery ring red with bullets and spilled entrails. Frank is a fucking crime magnet, and must have horrible luck too, because he routinely finds the worst of the worst of human garbage to turn into gore pinatas. He fights one of his greatest enemies, simply called the Russian, at his hideout, similar to the film, and meets up with Nick Fury, who helps him deal with the nuke, but the island it is being hidden on is destroyed along with the Russian operatives. Say what you like, but Frank is thorough. He returns to New York only to discover that the Kingpin, a long-running villain of the Punisher, Spider-Man, Daredevil, and a lot of what are called the street-level heroes of the Marvel Universe, and a further tie-in to the Marvel setting, has been taking over the New Chief family racket. When he raids Fisk Tower, the same one seen in 2018's Marvel's Spider-Man game, Kingpin eventually tells Frank that the real enemy are the Japanese Yakuza, who are trying to corner and control the Italian and Russian mob rackets. God, Frank fights all the crime. All of it. He's got a better track record than the cops, FBI, and Homeland Security combined. And Kingpin must have more money than the comics allude to, having to rebuild the place after the Punisher and Spider-Man have had their time destroying his operation. Anyway, the Punisher discovers the Yakuza are trying to steal high-tech weapons from Tony Stark, aka Iron Man, and he goes on to assault Stark Tower by himself, giving us an appearance by Iron Man in this game. And Frank has absolutely no problem shooting the fuck out of Stark while he's in the suit, despite bullets bouncing off the Iron Man outfit. At this point, I fully expected Iron Man to grease the Punisher, but Tony just sounds more like a disappointed dad as he redirects the Punisher to this Yakuza crime clan's hideout, the Takagi building in New York. During all this, Frank learns one of his longtime enemies, Jigsaw, has infiltrated the Yakuza, known here as the Eternal Sun, very much skirting the line between cool name and racist trope, and has been pulling the strings here. Jigsaw stole a copy of the Iron Man suit and made off with it before Stark could stop him, but got himself caught by the police and thrown into Rikers Island. Frank allowed himself to get captured by the cops so he could get sent to Rikers as well. And at this point, the flashbacks end and we snap to the modern day, where a riot breaks out during his interrogation. He escapes from the cops who are otherwise occupied and fights through rioting prisoners and the Eternal Sun Yakuza gang members until he reaches the roof of the prison, where he has a final battle against Jigsaw, who, improbably, has brought his stolen Iron Man toy with him until Frank kills him by throwing him out of the helicopter that the Punisher was escaping in. And roll credits, Frank gets away despite what would otherwise be a nationwide manhunt for him. Must be his superpower. Overall, despite the late age of the PS2 and with the PS3 and Xbox 360 right around the corner, this game sold around 1 million copies and turned a profit for Volition. Reviewers, however, were far less kind and somewhat savage, with the game coming in at around 68 out of 100 across PlayStation, Xbox, and PC, its release platforms, on Metacritic. Most blame the repetitive nature of the gameplay, but praise the torture scenes, which, I guess? I mean, if it's criminals, we're all for torture, it seems. A lot of people praised what was going on in Guantanamo Bay, too, although not on the 11 o'clock news, but most certainly around the Thanksgiving tables, after a few drinks. My favorite review, quote, comes from Maxim Magazine, Playboy Light, and reviewer Gene Newman, who said that the Punisher, quote, made the Grand Theft Auto series look like Super Mario Kart, end quote. Holy shit, Gene. Maybe you can get a job contributing game reviews to Entertainment Weekly if the Maxim gig doesn't work out. If you get that deep deleted saves lore reference, Keith and I thank you. But by and large, most outlets said it was too grim, but as far as comic book based video games, it didn't totally suck. That brings us to the controversy around this game. The ESRB threatened to slap the Punisher with an adults only rating for the violence, which would have hampered the sales across all platforms and absolutely doomed it. Which is a nice way for the ESRB to get companies to bow to its will by threatening their coffers. So we're really no better off here than when the self-imposed censorship shit started. Censorship is bad, no matter what, kids. So Volition instead made the interrogation kills suddenly turn black and white when it is about to get its goriest. And that palette swat is what brought the game down to a mature rating instead. So, fucking technically horseshit, but this is the world we live in. So even if you play the game in 2024, you will see the censored version in the kills as they turn black and white. In other countries, it was censored further, or put on media harmful to minors lists. I mean, it is The Punisher, a game about a brooding, mentally ill anti-hero who butchers criminals like hogs, a living embodiment of the wishes of the American death penalty system on two legs. So if you go into this game thinking that it'll be all about capes and spandex and bopping bad guys on the nose, more the fool you then. Plus, we've had plenty of cape superheroes do way, way worse since then. Controversies like this seem almost quaint by comparison today, and especially for a game that released during the time when we were deep in the teeth of the Iraq and Afghanistan war, seems a little tone deaf by the ESRB when they think it's too much for kids to see, when many of those same kids' dads were off half a world away remote detonating guerrilla fighters in a country 2 steps above the Stone Age due to decades of foreign bombing campaigns and ruled by brutal theocrats. And we got to see it all 24/7 on the news channels. It's kind of like being in a massive car accident and complaining about the scratch on your finger while ignoring the gushing head wound you have. Another case we can do nothing with, I suppose. Coming to the conclusion of this review, why did I not review this game far sooner? Why even do it at all? Like I said at the beginning of this review, when I first began this show, I'd made a list of games by console or PC that stuck out to me that I wanted to talk about. The Punisher did stick out to me as well. I bought it at GameStop day one, and I spent a long weekend playing through this short title. This was my favorite superhero, and I absolutely loved this game. Obviously, it would be completely overshadowed just a few years later by Arkham Asylum, which set a new standard for comic book to video game translation. And the more recent Spider Man games have pushed this title even further back into the collective gaming memory to gather dust. But I didn't feel at the time that anyone would be interested in this take. I'm getting the idea that time has been a little bit kinder to this game than I suspected, and this review is long overdue. Now, this character in this game, of course, is about revenge and vigilantism. I'm not someone who is a thin blue line supporter. Sorry if that disappoints you, but fuck you too. The cops are tools of the capitalist state in the US. However, I am also not above the understanding of vigilantism as it gives catharsis in a country and a world where crime is out of control. The people who are supposed to help us cannot because they are hamstrung by laws that benefit white collar crime, corrupt lawyers that are more interested in money than justice, a broken legal system, corrupt cops, a paramilitary terror state built to oppress, legal rulings by the Supreme Court that have harmed far more than helped, and people only looking for escapism rather than solutions. I'm not saying vigilantism is right. We have a long and bloody history in this country where it has gone horribly wrong or has been pursued for racist or sexist ends. But I understand the draw of it. I am also deeply disturbed by various loose cannon cops and SWAT members, isolationists, white nationalists, low-key fascists, and frustrated and scared ma and pa kettles across this nation, adopting the skull symbol of this fictional character as their entire world view, their personality, instead of being empathetic, rational adults who should really know better and understand that this form of escapist fiction, not a way of life that is any way acceptable. Much like how various groups in history have corrupted religious iconography for purely evil ends. We as humans are drawn to symbols. They resonate in our brains from early childhood, and we carry them throughout our lives. We cannot help but make sense of our complex world through easy to understand symbols. And when they get turned against us, disaster is sure to follow. The Punisher game is simple and short, yes. It's an easy 6 to 7 hours over a weekend or a few nights. A game that can be streamed, if you are so inclined, over 1 or 2 sessions. Does it have flaws? Absolutely, it was a late PS2 2005 game. We aren't judging it then against the standards we have now, and it is hardly less gory or bloody than any modern action movie. It's not all a bad game, despite the shit rankings by the game reviewer aggregates. It's just a little repetitive as a shooter with some really inventive environmental kills for clearly deserving movie trope villains. As I said, all the hits are here: Italian mobsters, Russians, Yakuza, as they have all appeared in American media. All the hits of the crime world from the 1970s and 80s, sure to tickle the fans of Reagan era action movies where the world was supposed to be simpler and everything in media was an allegory for the Cold War, the Vietnam War, Reaganomics, both pro and con, and a desire to return to a simpler American values in the world where those never existed to begin with. The Punisher embodies a lot of thought about that, filtered into a visual form of another believed and beloved bit of childhood media. The Punisher, and Frank Castle, is a man out of sync and out of time. He is a victim and predator. He is a reminder of our bloody past, like how Cro-Magnon man still haunts us, reminding us that civilization is indeed a thin veneer, a part of us we simply cannot be rid of no matter how many plasma TVs and Teslas and bureaucracy we bury ourselves under. He, too, can be a reminder of our own dwindling relevance and importance in a world and our own times as things move forward and change. He is a relic, a somewhat lost piece of media, as in this game he stars in. 2005 was a long time ago, but it is clear that we learned none of the lessons from that time. And neither does Frank as he goes from kill to kill on his war without end that only can end one way. We're just along to enjoy the ride until it stops suddenly and violently. Thank you for listening. Deleted Saves would like to thank Brad, Keith Gasper, Orden Wells, and Mass Llama for being patrons of the show. If you would like to become a patron of the show, please go to patreon.com and check out Deleted Saves Podcast. All donations go directly towards maintaining the show itself. Thank you.